The night my husband left me alone in our honeymoon suite to slip into the room next door with another woman, I didn't lose my mind. I woke up. That's the sentence I have to start with, because there is no gentle way to wrap a humiliation that raw. I still remember the smell of the room: fresh flowers, clean sheets, the air conditioner cranked up too high, the kind of cold that doesn't come from the vent, it comes from your soul. I was lying in bed, trying to control my breathing, feeling the weight of the simplest dress I'd ever worn in my life. Meanwhile, Jerome was fixing his tie like he was heading to a business meeting, not to the night that was supposed to begin our life together. He'd been off from the second he closed the hotel door behind us. Distant, quiet, every move calculated down to the millimeter. But it was his silence in the room next door that shredded everything. Not the comfortable kind of silence, not the peaceful, end-of-the-day kind of silence, the kind of silence that exposes things. A damp, heavy silence, thick with hidden intentions. The first thing that set me on alert was a soft noise. The bathroom door, half open, the light on, and then a whisper, muffled, intimate. The kind of whisper I had never heard from him before. My whole skin bristled, from my scalp all the way down my legs. The body knows, it always knows before the mind. I got up slowly, afraid to make a sound, like I was some kind of intruder in my own marriage. When my hand touched the bathroom doorknob, I felt the cold metal and a thud in my chest, as if my body was saying, "Don't go in," but my soul was begging, "You have to see." A white towel was crumpled on the floor, crooked, and when I bent to pick it up, I caught a different scent. Sweet, fresh, feminine. The smell of a woman who gets ready for someone special. It was so strong, there was no way to lie to myself. That wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't his. My throat closed up like an invisible hand was wrapped around it. "Calm down, you're tired, you're imagining things." But then I heard his phone buzz on the table. I walked over, my body feeling light and my legs made of lead. The name on the screen was saved as Mark Work. Mark did not exist at his job. I knew that. I had always known. The notification showed a preview of the message. "Did you get rid of her? 12:07 a.m." My heart jumped so hard, I almost heard the impact inside my chest. For 3 full seconds, I didn't move, like someone who's just been punched in the stomach and loses every bit of strength at once. I touched the screen slowly, like I was touching fire. Get rid of her. Me, the wife. Me, the bride on her wedding night. Me, the obstacle. The air sliced its way into my lungs like a knife. I didn't cry. Not yet. When Jerome finally came back into the room, walking with way too much confidence for someone who had supposedly just gone to get ice, the first thing I noticed was his shirt. He wasn't wearing the same one. This one was different, crisp, freshly pressed, scented, not a single wrinkle. And when I lifted my face to look him in the eyes, he looked away, not off to the side in general, specifically down at his own hand. The hand holding his wedding band. His expression was like someone carrying a burden, not a commitment. Like that ring was the wrong piece on the wrong finger. I felt a pain so deep, so physical, so silent, that I had to grip the sheet with both hands just to keep from collapsing. Before I could even form a thought, it happened. The laugh. At 12:12 a.m. A woman's laugh. Low, contained, intimate. That laugh cut through me like a hot blade. It wasn't a guest's laugh. It wasn't a hotel staff laugh. It wasn't someone just passing in the hallway. It was the laugh of someone who had just been given something I had never received for him. And in that moment, the floor disappeared. He realized I'd heard it. He turned his head too fast and said, barely moving his lips, "Must be people getting in late?" But his voice wasn't shaking from concern. It was shaking from guilt. My hands started to sweat. My vision blurred for a second. My whole body went into a state of alert I still don't know how to describe. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't insecurity. It was instinct. That night, long before my mind agreed to accept reality, my body already knew. Everything about that marriage was a facade. And I wasn't a character in it. I was the audience. And girl, that's when I realized something worse than a betrayal was about to happen. Something I never could have imagined in those early hours of the morning. I wish I could tell you that what happened on our wedding night was a lightning strike out of nowhere, but that would be a lie. When you look back with your heart awake, you realize the signs were always there. Small, subtle, quiet. The kind of signs we choose not to see because we're too in love or just too tired to face what they really mean. And girl, I was tired. Tired of trying, tired of reshaping myself, tired of always being the one who shrinks to fit. Jerome was never what people call a difficult man. Difficult is the one who fights, who yells, who pushes back. Jerome was worse. He was distant. Distance hurts more than a fight. Distance doesn't make noise, and that's why it eats you alive so slowly. I remember how our routine worked before the wedding. He'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., always before me. I'd hear the coffee maker going, but he wasn't making coffee for the two of us. It was just for him. And when I got up, half an hour later, I'd find his mug washed and the table empty. I always told myself, he's organized. He likes his routine. That's just how he is. But now I know no routine is so rigid that it can't hold a single act of care. He had room for everything in his schedule except me. And me, I filled whatever space was left. When he said he had to work late, I waited. When he said he couldn't go to a dinner with my friends, I canceled. When he said I was being too emotional, I shut up so I wouldn't make things worse. And every silence I swallowed piled up inside me like old clothes we don't wear anymore, but don't throw away either, adding weight, taking up space, choking the air. The first time I realized something was wrong wasn't on the night of that laugh. It was weeks before the wedding when I hugged him from behind in the kitchen and his body didn't respond. He went stiff. Stiff like someone being touched by a person they don't want there. Stiff like someone receiving affection they never asked for. I let go slowly, afraid of looking needy. And he just said, without looking at me, "I'm late." 2 words, 2 blows. We get used to crumbs and convince ourselves it's a feast. My friend Tanya used to say, "Naomi, you treat him like a priority. He treats you like an option." And I'd answer, "That's just how he is." Today, I understand, when a woman has to constantly explain what a man should be showing, something is already broken. Things with his family were a minefield too. Selena, his mom, never liked me. Not because of something I did, but because of everything I was. A sensitive woman who feels, who talks, who notices. Women like me make women like her uncomfortable, cold, calculating, emotional gatekeepers. She would drop those sentences dipped in equal parts venom and politeness. "You're too intense. Jerome needs peace, Naomi. Don't overwhelm him with your emotions." And Jerome stayed quiet, always quiet. Quiet in a way that cuts. Silence is complicity, and he was always complicit in her humiliations. Then there was his son, Darren. Polite, nice enough, but he always treated me like I was invading a space that would never really be mine. He never said anything straight to my face, but his looks? Looks say more than words. When I talked, he'd scroll on his phone. When I asked him something, he'd answer with one-word replies. When I tried to build any kind of bond, his eyes went to his father for approval, never to me. And I kept adjusting, because women adjust, right? We've been doing that our whole lives, adjusting our behavior, our tone, our clothes, our feelings, our presence. Until one day, you realize you've shrunk so much inside, you barely recognize yourself. But life went on, like it always does for anyone who keeps shoving pain under the rug. Engaged couples usually plan wedding details together. Me? I got the side tasks: guest list, floral arrangements, picking party favors. Meanwhile, he decided everything else: venue, date, menu, time, ceremony plan. It looked like leadership, but now I see it was control. Jerome was the kind of man who hands you the steering wheel while secretly choosing the destination alone. You only realize you were never really driving when you're already too far down the road with nowhere to turn around. The week of the wedding, he was more absent than ever, always with some work excuse, always handling details. And me, desperate to believe it was just pre-wedding stress, gave him space. The truth is, I gave way too much space in that relationship and got almost none back. On the wedding day, while I was getting ready, I felt something strange inside. It wasn't nerves, it wasn't fear. It was a silence that came from my chest, not from the room. A silence that whispered, "Something's wrong, but you're not ready to know yet." But I went on anyway, because anyone who's ever loved wrong before knows how easy it is to repeat the mistake when your hope is running on fumes. The ceremony was beautiful for everyone else. For me, it felt like a stage play under dim lights with a memorized script. When he held my hand, I felt the same stiffness I'd felt weeks before. But standing at the altar, you don't dwell on that. You focus on not fainting, not crying, not messing up your vows. He said "I do," looking at me, but his eyes were empty. At the reception, while everyone laughed, danced, toasted, I noticed all the little things. He kept disappearing for long stretches of time. He got irritated when I went looking for him. He kept his phone face down at all times. He talked quietly with his sister while checking his watch. But me, always polite, always gracious, always trying to protect something that hadn't even truly started yet, just smiled. I clung to the illusion down to the last thread, the way every woman who's lived through emotional abandonment does. And then we got to the hotel and everything collapsed. Now, looking back, I see that I wasn't abandoned that night. I had been abandoned for months. I just hadn't seen it. Because emotional abandonment doesn't begin when the door slams. It begins when the eyes stop seeing you. And that night, between a strange perfume, a muffled laugh at a hidden message, my whole body finally understood what my mind had avoided for so long. I was never the priority. I was a role, and he needed someone to sign off on the final act of his script. And the worst part? I still had no idea how deep the hole I was about to fall into really was. I've always heard that the truth doesn't arrive as a scream. It arrives as a whisper. And that night, even before I could put all the pieces together, my body was already whispering to me, "Naomi, something is very wrong." It wasn't the kiss in the room next door, not yet. It wasn't the muffled laugh. It wasn't the message saying, "Did you get rid of her?" Not even the scent of another woman's perfume on the towel. It was something more subtle, something I only understood hours later, when my heart was already collapsing and rearranging itself at the same time. It was the bracelet. That gold bracelet, delicate with black stones that seemed to absorb light. A piece that, when I picked it up off the hallway floor, made my hand go cold, as if it hadn't been dropped by accident, but left behind as a trace. And now I know, that bracelet didn't fall. It was left by someone who already felt far too comfortable in that hotel. But let me go back to the beginning of the investigation, to the moment when suspicion stopped being a feeling and became movement. The body moves first, the mind follows later. When I went back into the room after hearing that laugh, my legs were weak. Sitting down was almost a physical necessity. My chest rose and fell fast, like my heart was trying to warn me before my mind could understand. I sat on the bed, took a deep breath, and felt the towel in my hand. That sweet, fresh, slightly floral scent hit me like a memory that didn't belong to me. I pressed the towel to my face, closed my eyes, and my head throbbed. A buzzing, then a tightening in my throat, then a kind of heat behind my eyes. Calm down, think. But no matter how much I tried to think logically, my body wouldn't let me. My hand trembled, my heart beat unevenly, and his silence, that deep, icy silence, clung to me like a shadow. Then came the message. His phone buzzed on the table, lighting up the room like a flash. "Did you get rid of her?" I froze. My breath got stuck halfway in. My mouth went dry like I'd swallowed sand. It was the first concrete proof, like someone turning on a flashlight in the middle of the dark. And at the same time, it was like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The hallway and the first physical evidence. When I left the room, my steps were short and quiet, as if I were walking on broken glass. The hotel hallway was so still I could hear my own heartbeat echoing inside my chest. And then, near the emergency exit, I saw something shine. The faint light hit it like it was being displayed on purpose. I approached slowly, knelt, picked it up. It was a bracelet, gold, elegant, expensive, intentional. The kind of piece someone wears to be seen, not to blend in. When I touched it, a shiver crawled up my arm, like that object had its own energy, an energy that wasn't mine. The bracelet became my first symbol, my first physical proof, my first undeniable truth. I slipped it into the pocket of my dress like someone storing an emotional weapon. And standing there in that hallway, I realized something painful. She had a bracelet, and I had questions. The shadow behind door 214. I kept walking slowly, steadying myself against the wall, trying to breathe without drawing attention. When I passed room 214, I heard something that froze my spine. The sound of a latch sliding, then whispers, intimate whispers. I stopped on the spot. The air caught in my lungs. My hand tightened around the bracelet in my pocket. Then the door opened, just a sliver. I saw a corner of a white robe, feminine fingers holding the doorknob from the inside, a reflection of light on the floor. And then I heard his voice. Jerome, low, contained, carrying an affection I had never once received. My body went completely still, like prey, like a witness. And in that instant, it wasn't suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. Outside room 214 was the stage I never knew existed, and I was just the spectator of a script never meant for me. The front desk and the fear no one can hide. I went down to the lobby because I needed air. When I reached the counter, the young receptionist, the one with always kind eyes, went pale the second she heard my last name. She swallowed hard, hid a piece of paper behind the counter, looked around nervously. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Caldwell." Her voice unsteady. My body went cold. I didn't know what was on that paper, but I knew it was about him, about them, about us, or rather, what I mistakenly believed was us. "Did he come down here earlier?" I asked. She hesitated, took a breath, looked away. "He did." I felt the blood drain from my arms, the envelope that revealed the timeline of the betrayal. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. An envelope showing a double reservation, dated 2 weeks before the wedding, Jerome's last name, 2 guests registered under it. This wasn't a spontaneous betrayal. It was planning. It was scheduling. It was premeditation. My heartbeat was so loud, my ears buzzed like seashells. The silent investigation of a woman who has hurt too much to be naive. I walked back to the room slowly, every muscle vibrating. The bracelet still in my pocket, the perfume still on the towel, the message still burning in my memory, the whisper still echoing. And sitting on the edge of the bed, I began to investigate with the precise, cold clarity of a woman who has been hurt too deeply to stay innocent. I grabbed my phone and started writing everything down. 12:12 a.m., the laugh. Perfume on the towel, shirt change, message at 12:07, the movement at door 214, gold bracelet with black stones, nervous receptionist, hidden envelope. I wasn't in despair anymore. I was in clarity. The kind of clarity that rises from the deepest pain. And as I wrote, something inside me whispered, "This isn't just betrayal, it's a scheme, and you're inside it without knowing." I held the bracelet in my hand for the first time with purpose, looked at it, and understood. This object was coming with me to the end. This bracelet would be my anchor, my evidence, my truth. And in that moment, girl, I felt it. The worst was still ahead. I just had no idea that the truth didn't have only a woman's face. It had an agenda. I was sitting at the edge of the bed when I felt that pulse in my chest that isn't fear or sadness. It's a warning. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, almost ancestral. A warning that said, clearly, you need to see. But seeing hurts. Seeing changes everything. Seeing shatters the illusion you've clung to with bleeding fingers. Even so, I stood up. My legs were trembling, but they moved. My hands were cold, but steady. My heart was in pieces, but alert. The bracelet was still in my dress pocket, heavy like it had a heartbeat of its own. I opened the bedroom door slowly, like someone reopening a wound that never healed. The hallway was quiet, bathed in that yellowish hotel light that makes everything look like a bad dream. And I walked, slow. Each step felt like a chapter. Each breath felt like crossing an inner border. When I stopped in front of room 214, my entire body froze. I knew that if I pressed my ear to that door, I'd hear my own emotional death sentence. But I didn't have to lean in. The door opened on its own, a narrow crack, deliberate, controlled. And through that crack, I saw. First, the floor. Then a small red suitcase. Then a feminine silhouette. And then, the robe. The white robe. The same one Jerome had promised me as a honeymoon surprise. The same robe I had never received. The robe he'd probably chosen for another woman, with care, intention, intimacy. My breath stopped. My body locked in the doorway. But my mind went sharp as a photograph. I saw her fingers holding the door. I saw her shoulder, the soft curve of it. I saw her neck glowing under the lamp. And I saw Jerome's hand sliding along her back. A hand that had never touched me that way. Not once. Not in years. Seeing that wasn't a shock. It was confirmation. A scene my body had known long before my mind admitted it. Then came the sound. His voice. Soft, controlled, gentle. The kind of voice he never once used with me, not even on our best days. And right there, in that moment, I understood exactly what I was to him. Not a wife, not a choice, not a priority. I was logistics. I was a function. I was paperwork. Something inside me snapped so hard I felt it physically, like a rubber band stretched too far, finally breaking. But the truth wasn't finished. Because when the door opened just a little wider, it revealed something I never expected. Jerome wasn't just holding her. He was giving her something. An envelope. White. thick, stuffed with documents. Her suitcase was open, and he placed the envelope inside it. She smiled, a soft, easy, intimate smile. The smile of someone who has no fear of being with that man, unlike me, who always felt like I had to ask permission to exist in his world. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat, my legs, my wrists. I inhaled sharply. The bracelet in my pocket felt like it vibrated. I was about to step back when the door swung open fully, and his eyes met mine. The world stopped. No one breathed. Not me, not him, not the woman behind him. The look on his face wasn't guilt. It was terror. Terror that I had seen. Terror of losing control. Terror that the hidden world he'd built had been exposed. "Naomi," he tried, his voice breaking. I lifted my hand, not to defend myself, but to say, "Don't." I didn't need to hear anything. I didn't need explanations. I didn't need another lie. No man enters his lover's room on his wedding night and comes up with anything that makes sense. He grabbed the door, desperate to close it, to hide her, the suitcase, the envelope, the entire parallel life. But it was too late, because before he could shut it, she, the woman in the white robe, stepped forward behind him. Her hand lifted to her neck, the left hand, a careless gesture. And on her wrist, glowing under the lamp, the gold bracelet with the black stones. The same bracelet I found in the hallway, the same one I'd held in my pocket like evidence, the same one that had guided me all night. It was hers, her scent, her trail, her whisper. The symbol finally had a face. And in that instant, the shock became certainty. I took the bracelet out of my pocket, showed it to both of them. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at them and let the silence do the cutting. Her eyes widened, his face drained of color. And then, finally, I spoke, with the calmest voice I'd ever heard come out of my mouth. "Now I know who I am in this story, and it's not what you think." I turned around, walked back to my room, closed the door slowly, and in that moment, something inside me woke up. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rage. It was clarity. And clarity, girl, is the beginning of justice. When I closed the door to my room after facing what was behind 214, it wasn't just wood I was shutting. I was ending, for the first time ever, the phase of my life where I pretended not to see things just to avoid losing them. The doorknob turned slowly, the click echoed through the quiet room, and I leaned my back against the door like someone collapsing against a wall after a marathon they never wanted to run. My legs finally gave out. I slid down to the floor, sitting right there, my dress wrinkled, my hands shaking, my chest rising and falling too fast. My heartbeat was so loud, it felt like it was trying to break out of my body. Everything hurt, my head, my chest, my stomach, even my skin. And still, I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt. It hurt so much, it felt like someone had sanded me raw from the inside out. But sometimes, the pain is so big, the tears get stuck. They sit there, a tight knot in your throat. I reached into the pocket of my dress and touched the bracelet. It was warm, like it had absorbed every second of the night. I pulled it out slowly, placed it in my palm, and stared at those black stones glinting under the weak lamplight. It wasn't just a forgotten accessory. It was the entire symbol of my place in that story. I was the floor, and she was the shine. For a moment, I wanted to hurl that bracelet against the wall, smash it, break everything around me. But I didn't. Instead, I closed my fingers around it so tightly, the metal nearly cut my skin. Sitting there on the floor, my head resting against the door, a question rose inside me. Are you going to destroy yourself over this? Or are you going to use it? I took a long breath. It entered my lungs like it was carving space where everything had collapsed. I was scared. Scared of what would come next. Scared of facing the whole truth. Scared of being alone. Scared of being called dramatic, crazy, unstable. But along with the fear, something new was forming. Small, shaky, but real. A desire to stop abandoning myself. Jerome abandoned me in that hotel room, but I had been abandoning myself for years. Every time I swallowed a hurt, every time I stayed silent to keep the peace, every time I minimized my own needs to avoid confrontation. Enough. I stood up slowly, my legs heavy like they were filled with sand. I walked to the mirror. My reflection stared back. Eyes red, hair undone, lipstick faded. I looked at myself with a kind of estrangement. Who is this woman? And for the first time, I had the courage to answer silently. Someone who deserves more than this. I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to wake up. Then I went to my suitcase, grabbed my phone, and sat at the table. I could still hear faint noises in the hallway, doors closing, distant laughter somewhere on another floor. But inside the room, there was only the ticking clock and my breathing. I opened the Notes app and began writing. Not just a list, more like a map. 11:58 p.m. Noise at room 214. 12:07 a.m. Did you get rid of her? Shirt change, before, after. Towel with perfume. 12:12 a.m. The laugh, definitely from next door. Bracelet in hallway, gold, black stones. Front desk envelope, double reservation, 2 weeks earlier. Receptionist's reaction to Mrs. Caldwell. Each line steadied me. I still hurt, still trembled, but I was no longer lost. I was orienting myself. I picked up the bracelet again, placed it on the paper, ran my fingers over it. You thought you'd be an accessory left behind, didn't you? I thought. Turns out, you're my compass. The fear was still alive inside me, like a caged animal pacing behind my ribs. Fear of what he'd do if he knew I knew. Fear of the confrontation. Fear of accepting that some of the responsibility was now mine. The responsibility to get out. But in the middle of all that fear, a plan began taking shape. Small, shaky, clumsy, but a plan. I wasn't going to confront recklessly. I was going to prepare. I was going to observe more. I was going to save evidence. I was going to reach for help. I was going to choose myself. I laid down on the bed without even changing clothes, just kicked off my shoes and unzipped the dress halfway. Still holding the bracelet tight, like a reverse talisman. Not something that protected me from evil, but something that reminded me exactly where the evil was. Jerome came back eventually. I heard the card slide into the lock, the door opening, his steps entering the room. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. I controlled my breathing, kept it steady, even though my heart was beating out of rhythm. The mattress dipped. I smelled him, mixed with a perfume that wasn't mine. I heard the click of his phone plugging into the charger. He didn't say my name. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't touch me. He turned to the other side and fell asleep within minutes. That hurt more than any argument could have. Because a man who cheats and then cries, apologizes, panics, at least he feels something. Mine slept. While he slept, I stayed awake. Fear of the next day fought with fear of staying in the same lie. Every time I turned on the pillow, I repeated to myself, silently, "You're not crazy. You saw, you felt, you know." At some point during the early morning, I grabbed my phone and texted Tanya. "When I tell you what happened tonight, you won't believe it, but I need you to trust me." I didn't have the courage to say more, but sending that message felt like reaching out from underwater. The next morning, when he went downstairs first to check the breakfast hours, my body moved before my mind did. I went to his blazer hanging on the chair, reached into the inner pocket, found exactly what I expected. A parking ticket with notes scribbled on the back, car plate, time, and 2 letters, MB. My stomach twisted. My hand broke into a sweat. But I inhaled deeply and slipped that piece of evidence into my purse, right next to the bracelet. The fear stayed with me, of course. Fear that he'd discover I knew, fear of confronting him, fear of facing how much I had allowed. But even with fear, I was determined. I wasn't acting out of impulse. I was acting with intention. My plan wasn't to make a dramatic scene in the hotel lobby, or destroy things, or degrade myself trying to match their level. The plan was simple. Go home with everything I knew, organize the evidence, get guidance, decide whether the next conversation would be with him or with a lawyer. And one thing was already clear. The next person I would betray by lying would be him, not myself. I wasn't going to betray myself ever again. I took a deep breath, ran my fingers over the bracelet one last time before putting it in my purse. And for the first time in a long time, I walked knowing that even scared, I was on my own side. I had no idea yet what secrets were buried behind those documents I'd seen him slip into her suitcase. But I already knew this. When the whole truth came out, it wouldn't be just about love. It would be about motive. And there's a huge difference between being set aside because someone doesn't love you and being used intentionally. In my case, I was about to learn it was the second option. On the way back home, after that night that felt like an endless reel of pain, my body was present, but my mind was busy assembling a puzzle that had never been mine to solve. Every piece clicked with a cruel kind of precision. The bracelet, the perfume, the laugh, the changed shirt, the envelope he slipped into her suitcase, the double reservation from 2 weeks earlier, the initials MB written on the parking slip, the parking timestamp proving she'd arrived before I ever stepped foot in that hotel. I was preparing myself for a confrontation, but not a dramatic soap opera kind of confrontation. I wanted a confrontation that revealed, not one that diminished me. And girl, I was still trembling. Because confronting a manipulative man has nothing to do with strength. It's about surviving the way he tries to make you question your own sanity. When I got home, he was already there. As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't abandoned me on our wedding night. As if I were just another piece of furniture in his life. Jerome was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone with a calmness that hurt to watch. He looked up when I walked in, but didn't stand. His expression was the same one someone uses to greet a person returning from the grocery store. And that nearly killed me inside. Like he was saying, "You don't matter. You're irrelevant. You're replaceable." But the woman walking through that door wasn't the Naomi who begged for space. It was the Naomi who had seen and noted everything. I closed the door behind me, took a breath, felt the weight of the bracelet in my purse, reminding me I wasn't imagining anything. Finally, Jerome spoke. "We need to talk." The audacity. I let out a small laugh, not because anything was funny, but because sometimes your body laughs when your soul wants to scream. "Yes," I said, "we do." He adjusted himself on the couch, preparing to steer the conversation. As always, as he'd always done. But I sat tall, straight-backed, eyes steady. I knew this moment mattered. "Naomi," he began, voice controlled to perfection. "Last night you were stressed, emotional. It was a long day. I didn't want to pressure you, so I gave you space." Space? The same word he had used for months to cover every dismissal. "Space," I repeated slowly, letting the weight of the word settle. "You call that space?" He tilted his head, pretending confusion, pretending not to know exactly what I was referring to. "I slept alone in our honeymoon suite, Jerome." He swallowed hard, but kept his posture. Manipulators don't crumble easily. I had to take care of something, he said. I didn't want to wake you. You needed rest. You were anxious. I thought. I pulled the bracelet out of my purse, slowly, calmly, placed it on the table. He looked at it, and for a split second, so quick most people would have missed it, fear flashed across his face. Real fear. Lose something? I asked, a voice low and firm. He paled. That's not what you think. That bracelet isn't. I saw her wearing it, I cut in. I saw her hand. I saw the white robe. I saw you putting an envelope in her suitcase. Silence dropped between us like a steel door. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His pupils widened, his body confessing before his mouth ever would. Naomi, listen, that's not. I tapped my finger next to the bracelet. A single tap. A final verdict. It is exactly what it looks like. He shot up from the couch, pacing, running his hair through his hair, breathing heavily, like he was rehearsing guilt, not feeling it. Then he stopped, looked at me with a strange exhaustion, the exhaustion of someone caught before the end of their plan. Fine, he said. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. My heart froze. He sat down, leaned forward, and dropped it. This wasn't about love. His words hit me like a physical blow. It was about documents. For a moment, the world went silent. Even the clock stopped making sense. Documents, I repeated, my voice barely there. He rubbed his face. I needed your signature on a few things. Property, taxes, pending filings. It was easier if we were married. I stared at him, not breathing, not blinking. When everything was done, he continued, I was going to explain. We'd work it out. I wasn't going to leave you with nothing, but you had to sign first. That's all. That's all? I repeated, my voice turning sharper. You used me as a legal shortcut? He stayed silent, and his silence was more disgusting than anything he could have said. My hand tingled. I grabbed the bracelet, squeezing it until it nearly cut my skin. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Once, then again, insistent. I knew. Before I even moved, I knew. Jerome stiffened, color draining from his face. It's not her, he said quickly, panicked. She wouldn't come here. I said nothing, just walked to the door, my heart beating in my ears. I opened it, and there she was, Marissa Boyd, standing at my door, wearing a coat over a white robe, makeup flawless, calm, comfortable, like she belonged. Hi, Naomi, she said, like we were girlfriends. Jerome rushed to the door. Marissa, I told you not to. She raised her hand, silencing him. You don't control me. You never did. Then she turned to me, and with the confidence of a woman who feels untouchable, she said, You were just a step, nothing personal. My soul burned. She kept going. You were functional, that's it. I inhaled slowly, held the bracelet tighter, and something inside me shifted into place, like the final piece of a puzzle sliding in. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I didn't beg. I saw, and seeing is liberation. I walked back inside, grabbed the folder where I'd collected all my evidence, and returned to the door. I dropped the bracelet inside the folder. I looked at them, just looked, and said, Thank you. Both of you just gave me everything I needed. I zipped the folder shut, calm, steady, and then I finished. Now it's my turn to control the narrative. Jerome tried to follow me. Marissa stepped back. But at that moment, I had something neither of them ever imagined. Power, evidence, the story, and a reborn courage. I closed the door in their faces, slowly, quietly, definitively. And girl, that was the moment I realized. They had plotted against me, but I had just flipped the entire game. When the door closed behind them, the silence that followed wasn't the silence of humiliation anymore. It was the silence of a decision finally made. I rested my forehead against the wood for a moment, breathed deeply, and let my body loosen for the first time in hours. My legs were still shaky, my palms still sweating, but something inside me, an axis that had been crooked for months, finally aligned. I wasn't asking why anymore. I was asking, what now? I walked to the table, folder in hand, set it down, pulled out a chair, sat. I opened the folder slowly, like someone opening a wound to clean it out. Inside were screenshots of the reservations, copies of the parking receipts, my timeline notes, screenshots of the messages, the transcribed audio, and, right on top, the gold bracelet. I picked up the bracelet and let it rest in the center of the table. I stared at it for a long moment. This object had been, for weeks, a symbol of pure pain. Now, it was turning into silent evidence. I grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking, but steady enough. I scrolled through my contacts until I reached the name, Tanya. I sent a short message. "Can you talk now?" She replied almost immediately, "Call me." When I heard her voice on the other end, it felt like someone opened a window inside me. I told her everything, slowly, with pauses to breathe, swallowing down the thickness in my throat. I didn't skip anything. Room 214, the robe, the suitcase, the envelope, the bracelet, the message, the audio, his confession about the documents, Marissa showing up at my door, the words, "You were functional." She stayed quiet. Not because she doubted me, because she was processing the cruelty of it all. When I finished, her voice came firm, steady, no hesitation. "Naomi, this isn't just betrayal. This is calculated use. You can't sit still. You need to protect yourself." "I know," I whispered, "but I'm scared." "Scared of what?" she asked gently. "Being alone?" "Naomi, you've been alone for a long time. The difference is that now you're awake." That sentence cut so deep, it felt like truth cracking open inside me. She continued, "Find a lawyer. Gather everything. Don't go into emotional confrontation without structure. You already have the truth. Now you need protection." When I hung up, I felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear of the path ahead, relief of not being entirely alone in it. The next day, I scheduled a meeting with a family lawyer recommended by someone Tanya trusted. Walking into that office with the folder pressed against me, my hands sweating through the cardboard, I felt small for a moment. But then, I remembered the bracelet. I sat down, placed everything on the table, and said, "I know this sounds like a drama script, but it's my life. I don't want cheap revenge. I want justice and protection." He went through every document, every screenshot, every detail. Listened to the whole story without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Naomi, this is serious. This goes beyond cheating. There's clear evidence of bad faith, using your marriage for financial and legal gain. You have a strong case. You have a case." Hearing that was strange. Painful because my life had become a case, but stabilizing because it meant I wasn't imagining any of it. We started the legal process. It wasn't fast. Nothing that heals deeply ever is. There were notices, hearings, angry calls from Jerome, fake, civilized attempts to talk, messages from his mother calling me ungrateful. "Naomi, you're ruining my son's life," Selena snapped, her voice sharp with misplaced guilt. "He made a mistake. You're being dramatic." This time, I didn't swallow it. "He didn't make a mistake, Selena," I said calmly. "He made a plan, and I was the asset. Enough." She let out a bitter breath. "You're exaggerating. That's why he used me," I finished. Because I was too good to imagine someone being that cruel? Silence. I hung up. My heart pounded, but something inside me felt new. A boundary. Darren, the son, also chimed in. He sent a cold message. "You're embarrassing my father. This won't end well for you." I read it with an unexpected peace. I replied, "Humiliation was him abandoning his wife on their wedding night to be with another woman in the next room. Everything else is consequence." He didn't respond again. Slowly, the roles became clear. Me on the side of truth and rebuilding, them on the side of convenience and denial. At the main hearing, the nerves came back full force. My hands were so sweaty, I had to grip a tissue to keep steady. Before entering the courtroom, I took the bracelet from my bag and wrapped it in the tissue, like holding the entire journey in my palm. Inside, Jerome looked immaculate. Perfect suit, trimmed beard, expression of a wounded gentleman. His lawyer tried to paint everything as marital misunderstanding. When it was my turn, my voice shook at first. That's normal. But with each sentence, the weight lifted from my chest. I told the story of the night, of the room, of 214, of the bracelet, of the message, of the audio, of the documents. His lawyer tried the predictable. She is emotional, sensitive. Perhaps she misinterpreted. My lawyer kept it simple. Did she misinterpret these? And showed the parking receipt, the double reservation, the message transcript. The judge listened, looked between him and me. For a moment, I swear I saw a kind of tiredness in her eyes. Maybe she'd seen too many men thinking they could build two worlds and sit comfortably in both. The ruling. Recognition of bad faith in how the marriage was conducted, annulment with full protection of my assets, prohibition against using my name for any legal or financial activity from that period. It wasn't a trophy, it wasn't applause, but it was ground under my feet. It was safety. After the hearing, I went home and opened the drawer where I'd been keeping the folder. I emptied it, took out what needed to be saved for legal reasons, and then the bracelet. I held it last. I stared at it for a long time. It had been evidence, trigger, symbol, silent companion. For a second, I thought about throwing it away, then about returning it to her. But neither felt like closure, so I did something else. I took a velvet box I'd been saving for something meaningful, placed the bracelet inside, closed it, and wrote on the lid, "Reminder, never again accept being functional in someone else's story." I put it somewhere I can see occasionally, not as a wound, but as a vaccine. Then I made small changes around the house, removed the chair he said was so him, rearranged the living room, donated the wine glasses he bought but never let me use, placed photos of myself smiling on the shelves, bought a plant I'd always wanted, the ones he called tacky. Small things, but each one said, "This place is mine now." I went back to therapy, went back to cooking for myself, not to serve meals, went back to listening to my music, yes, the sappy songs he mocked, went back to laughing with Tanya on long calls without checking the clock to avoid irritating him. Jerome moved on. I heard he stayed with Marissa, on and off, full of fights and secrets. And even though remembering still hurts sometimes, a calm part of me finally knew that wasn't my problem anymore. I wasn't healed. Scars don't vanish, but they stop hurting the same way. And that's where rebuilding truly begins. Not when life goes back to what it was, but when you decide it will never be what it used to be. If I told you that after everything, I simply moved on as if nothing had happened, I'd be lying. Scars don't disappear just because the truth finally came out. They stay. But with time, they stop hurting as much and start teaching. The first days after the hearing felt strange. I'd wake up in the morning and, for a few seconds, forget everything. Then I'd open my eyes, see the empty side of the bed, and remember, there was no Jerome. No lies, No quiet dread of sharing a life with someone whose soul was always somewhere else. I was alone with myself. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't feel like punishment. It felt like a beginning. One afternoon, while organizing a drawer, I found the velvet box where I'd stored the bracelet. I sat on the bed, placed the box on my lap, and took a deep breath before opening it. When I lifted the lid, something inside me settled into a quiet understanding. There it was, the bracelet, shining just like before. Such a small object, and yet so heavy with meaning. I ran my finger gently over the black stones, and for the first time, that touch didn't trigger a sharp pain in my chest. It didn't bring back shame or rage or the memory of being abandoned. It brought clarity, it brought understanding, it brought closure. I closed the box and put it back, not as evidence of a wound, but as proof of a rebirth. And girl, this is where I want to talk to you, to the woman listening right now, probably holding back tears or memories or a hurt you've never had the space to name. Because my story is mine, but parts of it probably belong to you too. Maybe you've lived through a cold love, a silence that suffocated you, a betrayal that shattered you, an abandonment that cracked your confidence, a humiliation no one witnessed, a pain you swallowed for the sake of peace. Maybe you've been used, ignored, minimized. Maybe you've spent months or years dimming your own light while holding someone who never truly chose you. And maybe, right now, you're wondering, is it worth starting over? Let me answer you with the full truth of someone who's been on the floor and had to stand up again. Yes, it's worth it. Every step, even the painful ones, every tear, even the ones that felt like they would drown you, every silent night, even the ones that hollowed you out. Because starting over isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let the past steal your future. And I know you might be tired. Tired of being strong, tired of forgiving, tired of trying, tired of explaining, tired of being the one who feels too much, gives too much, carries too much. But let me tell you something I took far too long to learn. You don't feel too much. Other people feel too little. That was their failure, not yours. They're the ones who couldn't love at the depth you deserved. They're the ones who lacked recognition, courage, honesty. And you know what that means? You never lost. They did. Today, when I think back to that hotel hallway, the white robe, the 214 door, the messages, the envelope, the moment when the truth finally showed its whole face, I don't see only pain anymore. I see rebirth. I see strength. I see a woman who finally came home to herself. And I want you to understand deeply, truly, that what they did to you does not define who you are, but what you choose to do with it will shape who you become. If today you feel wounded, tired, emptied out, breathe. Just breathe. Because even if you can't see it right now, there is life after this point. There is peace, there is tenderness. There is a place where you don't have to beg for space. There is someone, and it might be you, who will love you in a way that doesn't hurt. And when that day comes, you'll look back at your own bracelet, your own symbol of pain, and understand it wasn't an ending. It was the beginning. If this story held you, if it echoed something you lived, if it touched something sore inside you, then let me tell you one last thing. I'm holding you from here. You're not alone. And your story isn't over. It's starting now. If this story held you in any way, leave your like and your comment. Your voice matters here. And you matter more than you know.